Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Bear shaft tuning? Why, I think it's a joke and a waste of time and money. Well, I've been shooting bows for more than 40 years. And the majority of that time, I shot the wrong hand bow. I shot right hand, and I'm left hand dominant and left eye dominant. So, what do you know? I was a kid when I started, didn't know any better. And I had a really crappy bow. I dumpster dove in the archery club for my first bow. Somebody threw one out and it was in bad shape. But my best friend and I managed to fix that sucker, get it running, and even though one limb bent a little more than the other, it could still shoot straight. So who cares? We even dumpster dove for my arrows and put arrows together and cut down ones that were way too long and cut them down to what would work and seemed to work at least anyways. So we had a blast as kids. And I never stopped there with archery. I still continued into archery later on in life, and I started getting these things called Indian bows, which are made out of fiberglass, so you can leave them strung up forever. You'll never hurt them. But I got those, and they're usually 20, 25, 30 pound draw at best, okay? And they shoot pretty good. And, as long as you got decent arrows, they'll fly straight too. That's the big thing. And that's where we talk about bear shaft tuning. It doesn't really matter as much as to, I guess, the bow itself, whether it's a compound or a traditional bow. And traditional means like recurves, means long bows, short bows, horse bows, self bows, okay, traditional bows. So no compound. In other words, no wheels on there. You're pulling back that full weight and you got to hold that full weight back there all the time. Compounds have what's called a let off. So you pull back all that massive weight till you get to a certain point, then it's like, and now you're only holding back between 7 to 11 pounds, depending on the bow, okay? Anyways, so if we get a little educated at least, we will end up with a bow with hopefully the right length of arrows. And the length is very important to fly straight. The length is very important to end up in the target straight, okay? But also a concentric arrow, so something that's not bent, okay? And this is an aluminum arrow and it bends really easily. These are arrows that you basically get one shot with, maybe two if you're very lucky, but they do bend very easily and they're very expensive. And that's probably why more people buy carbon fiber now, because you can shoot those things till they fracture. Once they fracture, they're done. But otherwise, they don't tend to bend and stay bent. They're straight, and hopefully they start out straight too. You can get bad carbon arrows too. It happens. So if you want to talk about bear shaft tuning, I've investigated this subject quite in depth. And I found a lot of mixed opinions too, which made me just go, you know what? I think we just need to throw this crap out the window where it belongs, and people ought to stop listening to these yahoos because nobody has all the same information. Because if everybody knew this stuff well enough, they would all have at least 95% of their crap together and they'd all have the same info. And that is not happening, it seems. Okay, and we have different variables, different thought processes where people think, well, this is right and that's right. Look, when you're bear shaft tuning an arrow, it's to your specific bow. Okay, so if somebody has got like one of my bows, a PSE Nighthawk, and they're going to bear shaft arrows to that Nighthawk to tune that arrow to that Nighthawk. Well, you know what's important? Making sure the damn bow is set up right first. So that means you have to be within the minimum and the maximum amount of brace height first to where you're comfortable with that brace height. You tune those arrows based on that brace height. And that brace height must be repetitive every single time, or you just wasted all your time, money, and energy on equipment and arrows that are now screwed because now they will not shoot right because your brace height is out by half an inch, okay? Or a quarter of an inch out, okay? One direction or another, okay? So you have to ensure that you always check your brace height every time you string up your traditional bow. It must be precisely the same. Problem is, every time you shoot it, that string stretches, and it stretches, and it stretches, and eventually it's going to be out by too far, and then you're going to wonder why your shots are off. And it's not because the arrow is probably the problem, it's because your bow is the problem. And strings stretch. That is just the way it goes. But they only stretch to a certain point, and eventually they just snap, and that's it. Because they're only going to tolerate so much. However, nobody talks about that part, okay? Well, they might talk about the brace height part, how that's important, but I've seen channels that talk about brace height being important to make sure that you are always getting the same actual draw for the feel, for the poundage of what you're drawing, and that you're getting the same release amount, the same amount of forward limb movement, because that's all controlled by brace height, and everything else is like, oh, do we really need to know all of this? Well, a lot of it definitely I agree with. And I definitely agree with brace height. It really does affect how well your arrow is going to launch out of the bow, and whether it's going to shoot accurately or not. So you have to have a consistent brace height. That is like number one, uno nuno, okay? You have to make sure that's correct all the time. Otherwise, it does throw off your shot accuracy. It's going to have to, because the limbs move forward as you release the string, and if they release more forward than they did the last time, you have a different way where your shot is going to be affected, okay, plus or minus. So it is important to have consistent brace height, something I'm starting to get a little bit more paranoid on, because I de-string my recurve every time. It's a takedown bow, but I de-string it anyways every time, so that means I got to make sure those same amount of twists remain in the string, and I got to check my brace height, and then I got to freaking tweak it, and it's like, you know, at least with my compound, it's not so sensitive. It's a little different. But with the traditional bows, they are so freaking picky. So it doesn't matter that you tuned an arrow to your bow. If your brace height is out, guess what else is out? We know what you worked so hard for. It would be just simpler if people would just like forget about this whole bear shaft tuning thing, because it's not a reliable science, okay? Everything I've found on bear shaft tuning across forums, across YouTube, it is not a reliable science, okay? At least not at this point in the game. So you just need to have the correct length of arrow for your correct draw length, and the correct spine of arrow for your draw weight. As long as you got all that taken care of, and you have the correct feathers or plastic vanes, depending if you're shooting compound or recurve, you should be good as long as your arrows are straight. I mean, if anything, invest in a roller to make sure that your arrows still roll straight. They're not wobbly, because once they go wobbly, you're screwed. So you want them to spin concentric. Okay, that is probably more important than anything over chopping little bits and pieces off to get an exact precise thing. Like, we just went through this with my compound, and I showed you guys some pictures on my last video about right and wrong arrow length, and you saw exactly what went on there. I went 28 inches from the throat of the nock here. Okay, that's the throat at the very end. I went from there to here, and I cut it 28 inches, and the damn arrow was too short. When I went to the archery shop, well, it's called the archery place, okay, he took a full-length arrow like this, and he pulled it back. It was actually longer, it's 34 inch, but he pulled back my bow all the way, which stops at 28 inches, because that's what the bow is set for. Beautiful thing about a compound, you can't overdraw them. Whatever the draw length is set to, that's it, baby. You don't get extra. Okay, so that's a nice bonus, okay? So he drew it back, and he said, put your finger in front of the riser, so fat part of my finger. Then I went on the other side, and I put the mark, okay? He said, mark the arrow about where you want it in front for the stick out. And it turned out that that arrow ended up being 28.5 inches from the throat of the nock, okay, to the end of the arrow where it got cut, and that's before the insert, okay, is precisely 28.5 inches. That's pretty damn good. Okay, so all 6 got cut the same. You know what? All 6 of them fly straight as a freaking whip. Now, I don't always hit the bullseye because that's on me. Okay, and sometimes, you know, I'll get a couple of bullseyes, but then I go over here, or over there, or up there. That's me jerking the bow. So when you're bear tuning, it's not always about hitting dead center. It's about getting that arrow to go straight into the damn target board and stay straight and level. Well, you're not going to get 100% level, obviously. Okay, nothing ever is. Now, the one thing I'll say about bear shafting, there's some positive sides to this, obviously. You're shooting an arrow that has no feathers or fletches. Okay, so no plastic veins, no feathers. Now, that thing is not going to be affected too easily by wind because, well, there's nothing to get in its way on the arrow. It's just the arrow, so there's very little impact from wind. But also when you're doing this, you should be doing it on a non-windy day or doing it indoors to get those arrows tuned properly to be straight, okay, into the target. So either way, once you add feathers or fletches, plastic being fletches, feathers being feather fletches, whatever you want to call them, I freaking don't care. But whatever length you use, whatever height you use, whatever profile you use of feathers or plastic veins, now the wind is going to take control of this thing. And now you're adding extra back weight that you didn't have there before, which is going to pitch your arrow down at the back and pitch it up at the front. So now you got to counterbalance the weight in the front to get that thing to sit perfectly even, which means you got to figure out the exact precise balancing point of that arrow with the tip and the feathers on there so that everything is dead spot on for weight distribution, okay? And then at least you know you got a balanced arrow and you know your arrow is straight. Now, is it going to go sideways? Is it going to go, you know, left or right, or is it going to hit up or down? If the arrow is balanced properly, it should stay at least parallel. Well, that doesn't mean it's not going to cock left or right on you, okay? That can happen from the wind because now you have veins or feathers in the way, and these arrows spin, and it causes a turbulence, which can cause a shift. So you need to have the right angles, and you got to know that the weight on this tip, if it's a field tip, well, there's nothing there, okay? It's just a weight up front, but it's going to help with up and downs. It's not going to do a whole lot for left and rights because your back end is going to swing left or right on you a bit. But broadheads, now broadheads are kind of interesting because when you slam a broadhead on, especially a triple blader, but even a double blader creates a vortex as it spins. Okay, now this, because these have vent slots or because of the style, okay, this thing's spinning, it's causing wind to go around here, which is to help stabilize the front as it's spinning. Same thing as if you had a totally flat or solid blade, so no vents, okay, it's going to cause a certain kind of a vortex to happen too as it's spinning. So you've got to have the right head on there to work with the feather size and profile properly. Otherwise, what the hell did you spend all that time bear tuning this thing for? Because it has to work the same way naked as it does. It have to work the same way with it, everything on here now. Everything has to be correct. Otherwise, your spin rate can pull you this way or pull you that way, which can also get you to dive bomb or go up. It's going to knock something off unless things can be spinning properly, and the wind outside can throw you off too at the back end. It can shove you this way or that way. Same as hitting here and hitting there. It can throw you. There's so many variables, right, that I don't even see being accounted for here on this shaft tuning. They're just like, well, it flies like a laser beam now with a field tip on it at this amount of grain weight with this grain weight of insert for my bow. Now you got to do yours and figure out all that math. So go spend a ton of money on all these different weights of inserts, all these different weights of field tips and styles of field tips and different kind of knocks and get all. And there's a lot they're not telling you that has to go on to do this, to tune for your specific bow. every bow is going to tune differently. And even two bows the exact same model are not going to tune the same way either, okay? And that you need to realize, because nothing is built exactly the same. So hopefully this information helps you out. But given the fact that my compound has arrows now that are safe and of proper length and proper spine as well, okay, because that was another problem we had. There were all mixtures of spines in that box. Everything is working great. Now it's just about me working on my accuracy at different ranges and finish sighting in my friggin' sights on this thing, so that I can have this ready for turkey and deer hunt, okay? Because I'm definitely going to use this thing for deer hunting. Turkey, probably going to go with my recurve, but we'll see if I get good enough at my recurve, fine. If not, compound's coming out instead. And then I'll just keep working on traditional archery either way until I get better at it. But right now I'm getting pretty damn good with the compound, and I'm getting it sighted in really good. So, and I'm still waiting for some new arrows to come in that I ordered for it, so I have extras, and half a dozen of those are getting broadheads put on them. So same as I got a half a dozen broadheads set aside for my recurve for 6 of those arrows out of 12. And that's for my 40-pound limbs, 500 spine. So we'll see how things end up in the end, but my arrows are flying perfectly straight that I have, that I just got cut, and they were not friggin' bear shaft tuned, okay? They're like, pull them out of the box, they're Eastons, we got 6. They got the shorter fletch on them, or vein. Okay, that works, cool. Cut it to the length we need. Yep, looks good. Totally safe. Lots sticking out there. We're good at full draw. Perfect. And she'll just beeline her right into the target as straight as a whip. What tuning did we do? Excuse me? Did we do barrel shaft tuning? No, we didn't. We just pulled things out of the box and they were all straight. You know, and we also got lucky that all 6 arrows were perfectly concentric. Because the way they fly, we know these arrows are at least straight. But arrows also don't fly straight either. They do kind of wobble, but the main shafts themselves do roll straight. They roll perfectly even and concentric. So we know we got 6 good shafts in a row, and we know that when we cut those shafts down to the length we needed them, we got every one of those bullseye at precisely 28.5 inches from the throat to the very front before we put it even on a tip or an insert. Perfect. That works. 28-inch draw, 28.5-inch long arrow, not including the actual screw-in tip. We're golden, man. That's all there is to it. So, you know, how hard is that? You know? So, anyway, but let's see them work on some more rocket science. If they ever do get enough solid foundation to find something that actually is more feasible and less hassle, then fine. But until then, I'm not going to bear shaft tune anything because I've never had to before. Why should I actually start now? Why should you start now when there's too many other variables once you bear shaft? Now you got to worry about fletches and tips you're using as well. And you also got to watch that length too, that if you are too short, you've created a dangerous arrow. Oh, it flies like a laser, but it's a ½ inch too short. And it's dangerous once you get that friggin' broadhead on there. You need that extra. Oh, but I can't have the extra or it does this. Well, guess what? Maybe try a different brand of arrow or a different spine. Or maybe your poundage has an issue. Maybe your brace height is your issue, because that's all stuff that can throw off these arrows too. So even after all that hard work, if your brace height changed by ½ inch, guess what? So did this. All right? That's all there is to it. Catch you on the next one. See ya.